Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Statikk, and we are here for the patch 11.11 postmortem. This is where we talk about the things we think worked, things we think didn't, and things we're going to carry forward moving forward on the set. So this was an interesting patch because this was, I'm going to call it the vacation patch for me because I was on vacation, and you guys did what you thought was right and made some changes. So yeah, what are your kind of thoughts going into this? Because we were just coming off that Skirmisher patch as well that was really rough. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was on vacation the patch before, and then you on the
Yep.
vacation. So there was a kind of a chain there. We did have a little bit of window where we were in communication, but it wasn't a ton. But yeah, we were coming off the skirmisher patch where it was kind of, skirmishers were kind of falling off at least a little bit, but it was kind of dominating the meta, especially in our metrics. Like it was just like really crazy. And we just in general are just seeing a lot of stale gameplay overall in terms of how players were all playing the game. Everybody rolls at 7 on a specific round, and it just I feel like that was kind of what inspired a lot of our kind of pushes in this patch. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we could talk for hours, but I want to keep this video a little shorter than the last few, so we're just gonna dive right in. The UI stuff, the recipe hints, I think were sweet. They're there for players who need them. Those are just sick. Shop rates. Okay, let's talk about this one. This is a big one right off the bat. The level 7 odds, I think were solid. I think making 3 costs more accessible. I just think this was a slam dunk. 3 costs have been the thing. We're seeing more Riven. We're seeing more Nocturne. We're seeing more Katarina. Like, this to me just seems like a slam dunk. And I think one of the things that you're seeing over this patch, the last patch, the next patch, is like getting the roll odds with Chosen versus the roll odds without Chosen have been different, and we probably should have accounted for that earlier on. Would you agree with all that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we kept going back and forth, like, how much do we want to change our, like, fundamental systems between sets? And, we always want to be like, hey, let's do as little as possible so everyone doesn't have to relearn all these things. But the reality is you kind of have to relearn everything anyways because so much of the content switches up. And I think we just need to be more proactive about just doing the right thing from
Yep.
the get-go.
Yep. Now, the level 6 one, this one I think you and I aren't aligned, and we're still trying to figure out the right answer here. I will say directionally, I like the goal statement you had. That, like, level 6 is when you roll for your 2 costs, and if you want to go a 2 cost carry, which there should be viable 2 cost carries in the game, level 6 makes sense to be that level. So I think on that part, we're both aligned. The question is, though, it was already 35%, so the only place to go was 40%. But historically, 40% has kind of made them too forcible. And so I'm still not sure that 40 is the right call here. But what are your thoughts here?
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of feedback from, all types of players saying, this might seem too high. And my reasoning, like you said, was kind of more like, hey, 2 costs need to be more differentiated from 3 costs because I think historically we've just always seen 2 costs and 3 costs be so similar to each other, and just like whichever champs were strong in those pools were the relevant ones, and that kind of just was the end of the story. And so I think my theory here is, level 6 is for 2 cost rolling, and in particular, 2 costs crest at a higher percentage, 40%, than 3 costs, which is at 35%. So previously, they were both going to crest at 35%. I just found that to be a little bit weird considering the cost difference. My hope is that, that 2 costs just kind of stand out more differently from 3 costs. And in particular, I really hope that, I really think that what happened is we just overtuned a bunch of 2 costs that made the beginning of this patch feel really rough in terms of, brand reroll, set, Varus, like, those 2 costs were tuned like 3 costs in a way, at least the 3-star versions. And I feel like that kind of made it feel a little bit too reliable for how much power they were bringing in. So
Yeah. And to be clear, like, even I tried to for the next patch. I considered reverting it, and you and I discussed it, and we ended up not. We're going to leave it alone. Instead, we're going to try the tactic of bring the 2 costs down a bit so they're not quite as insane. Still good to go for, but not quite as insane. And I think this is going to be something we're admittedly struggling with for a while. And historically, 2 costs have been actually the costs that we have struggled with the most. Like, what a 1 cost is very clear to us. What a 3 cost is very clear to us. 4 cost, 5 cost. 2 cost is awkward because if it's too good, it replaces 3 cost. If it's not good enough, it's nowhere near as good as a 1 cost. It is a very awkward spot to deal with. So definitely don't like look bad at, like, it's a hard problem to solve here. So for now, I think we're gonna leave it alone, even though you and I still don't see eye to eye here. But like I said, you're gonna see nerfs to things like Hecarim, Brand, and we already saw that in the B patch, which we'll talk about, to things like Kennen, Set. So cool. Okay, the shadow item. It was interesting because when I first put this in, and you talked about this in the patch rundown, I had way more aggressive numbers, and you guys pulled it back, and I think that was correct. I think that was absolutely correct. This was a small bump in the amount of shadow items, and I think a healthy one. So to me, this change just seems correct.
Yeah, and I think for how shadow items are currently in our game, it made a lot of sense. I think just to give more exposure, and I think it was a nice way to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, this one seems pretty solid. Okay, the Nico change. Actually, there's two things here. There's the slightly raising the odds of getting champions over gold. And we have seen some resistance because a lot of players are now like, if you get an early Zyra or Ashe or a Nunu, it can decide the early game. But I think this was actually more of a placebo buff than anything, and the meta kind of the meta did more harm here than the actual change, because the actual change was very small, in the neighborhood of like 5%. But again, with the meta switching to A-bombs and Draconic being so strong, I think that exacerbated the pain here.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, when it comes to these like deeper systems around like loot or shops, like small changes kind of do have big impact sometimes. And but honestly, I personally think that it's a positive impact, but I understand the critique of like, well, now starts feel more high rolly or stuff like that. Like, I get it, but I also feel like it makes the game more fun.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is like getting an early 3 cost can give you direction and really help make the game feel better. I think it's up to us to make sure the 3 costs are all at least within a range of value. Like, again, if Nunu and Riven and Draconic ones are that much better than Yasuo, and I'm trying to think of another good 3 cost carry here. But
you could short circuit too,
yeah. But then we have to make sure that that's a little bit better balanced, and so I think that'll be the thing to move forward in the future. And then the Nico change. The Nico change seems solid from what I understand here, giving a champion so that now if you need the gold, you can Nico the champion. That being said, it still didn't fix the case. It's a lot rarer now, but the case of 2 white orbs, one of them 2 gold, one of them a Nico. Mm-hmm. That case still exists in the game. But overall, I think this was still an improvement change and has made the 2 gold Nico starts less common and less painful.
Yeah, can't disagree. I think these are really tough because we don't want to necessarily like mess with the system so much that they're just like spitting out exactly what you expect every other game, So that variance and that has to be there. So yeah,
sweet. Okay, Abomination. We reduced the cast time. Think that's fine. We buffed A-bomb 3 and 4. We buffed A-bomb on the health, the base health, the AD, and the AD per star level. And certainly A-bomb has become a lot more meta since this change. I don't think it's just this change, but this change has helped. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't know. These kind of like summoned units, I don't know what to call them, but like, Galio and Mech before and now Abomination, it's just like really tricky to balance because how fast you can get these things online and how they don't really exactly correlate to, a regular unit. We always have a tricky balance and just trying to find the right numbers for them, and usually we only get it by like the second half of the set, and then sometimes we like switch things up and we have to rebalance it anyways. I feel like we overshot on the high end here. I know in statistics wise, like the high end of A-bomb looks a little wacky to me, but yeah, I mean, I think it's been nice to actually have it be playable, because I think previous to this change it kind of felt like a troll thing to do. So
I talked to Ken about this, and this is one of those changes that like I think the direction that like A-bomb needed buffs, right? But I think making sure the identity of A-bomb was clearer, this kind of missed that mark. The big criticism I have of A-bomb right now is its best itemization is Death Cap, i.e. Hurricane, and it basically plays out like an assassin. It charges into the backline, and with explosive, ridiculous amounts of attack speed and damage, kills 2 to 4 units, and then often doesn't even need a second cast because it already blew up half the team. I don't think that's what we envisioned when we had this A-bomb being created. And so I would have liked to see changes that pushed it more towards the identity we wanted for A-bomb, and I think that's what we're going to see in like 11-12, things like that. But like you said, overall though, like, would I have pulled these changes? Probably not, because A-bomb was basically a non-trait in 11-11, other than A-bomb 3. And I will say A-bomb 3, like you said, that's probably the hardest one to balance, because that can come online at like 2-1. So that one's the real tricky one, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Forgotten 9. This nerf is like, the data certainly showed it needed it, but again, survivor bias, like...
Yeah, we've had a really tough time, I think, with the higher chase traits this set in particular, and I can't really put my finger on it, but it just feels like we turn it up a little bit and then it seems absurd, but then like people aren't really playing it, and so yeah, I think I'm not really sure how to take away from this, but I think we've just been over harsh on some of these chase traits for sure.
Yeah, like I said, the survivor bias I think is hitting the data here, because it's like you have to be level 9, you have to have Forgotten, and then it's good, but like, shouldn't it be? So especially the level 9 chase traits, like I think there's a big difference between 5 A-bomb, which is like, I found a spat, versus 9 Forgotten, which is I hit the expensive level 9, I held all these things to the end, I put it all in. Like, that burden, I think, is a big difference here.
Yeah, I think we should do a big pass on just figuring out all those chase traits and making sure that we may have already done that for this next patch, but yeah, just figuring those numbers out.
Yep. The Knight nerf, Knight 6, I'm fine with this one. To be honest... And I'm just going to say this, maybe this is the first time I've said this publicly, I think Kayle is just so far off the mark right now to a healthy champion that honestly her being out of the meta is better for the game than her being in the meta. I do think we owe it to ourselves to try to fix Kayle, but right now Kayle is just so unfun to play.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because it's like she's always meant to be more of like a niche composition. Like I don't think we ever wanted this to be like the best composition in the game, just like stalling till 20 seconds into the fight and then killing everybody automatically. Yeah. I think even Witty's vision was to be more like a kind of like a thing at the end of a fight to make sure that like fights never got too slow. So.
Yeah, it's a big project I'm going to take on in 11-13. I even talked to Witty about it to make sure he was fine with it. But basically right now it feels like Kayle is not a champion until 10 seconds left, at which point she's a bomb and explodes the game, and you win. I think we're going to try to smooth that curve out a bit, where it's like, she's actually okay in the early game, and you could actually run her in something like Legionnaire or Redeemed, because she actually outputs okay damage, and if it happens to hit 10 seconds left, she gets to do even more, but not like auto-win.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that this conversation was about Knights, but then we kind of it's just like Knights and Kales are right now so
they're so intertwined.
It's just like kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, it saves us a conversation at Kayle. So, okay, Skirmisher. So, okay, this one's tough, and I'm gonna go first here because like clearly you were coming off of the Skirmisher patch, and holy crap, if you had a 3 Skirmisher start into a level 6 Skirmisher, all 1-stars. The amount of power you were getting from the trait was just like the freest ride ever. And I think you took a crack at trying to address this by changing this to percent health. Overall, I think that was correct. I think having 6 1-stars giving you the full amount of power was correct. Or like, I'm glad you fixed that. So I think this change was good. But I do think, and this will kind of be the sum of all the changes, the Skirmisher Whiplash was probably one of the worst cases we've had in the history of TFT, where it went from S tier to C- tier. And like we really have to avoid doing stuff like that, because it's like, I learned this comp, I'm really good at this comp, and then it's just completely out of the meta. That's the big miss for me, I think.
Yeah, and I think this change in particular actually made it harder to like figure out where exactly it should go, because I wasn't sure what the power level of it was. Actually, like we did some math, and like certainly it was worse at 1-star, but after that it got kind of hazy on the math. Like, is this actually weaker at this point? Can players play around it by itemizing some health items and getting to 3 stars? I mean, I do like that I've seen, some re-rolling skirmishers actually work when they high roll, but
Yeah.
like, obviously, yeah, it's a very inconsistent and just like weak composition right now, and a lot of it has to do with this and nerfing a bunch of their champions down the road, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and that's why I do think this exact one was correct. Like, I think I'm buffing 3 in the next patch a little bit, but like not by a lot. It's not that far off. So, the Spellweaver change. This is one that came in pretty late, pretty hot. This was, pull back on the Velka's nerfs a bit and nerf Spellweaver because it was giving too much. I'll be honest, like I get why pro players wanted this. I'm not sure this was necessary. We're certainly not seeing a lot of Spellweavers now.
Yeah, certainly not 4. But the issue we're also running to is I think we were running like a lot of simulations and Velka's was just performing really well, surprisingly. And so I think, I'm not sure if this was the patch where we also hit him, but yeah, we ended up doing a nerf here just to try to address it. But maybe it was just the wrong read,
Yeah, the good news is I don't think it like broke anything either, because like 10 AP here isn't going to make a big difference. And if anything, this goes into a much deeper systemic problem, how giving AP to casters forces them into Jeweled Gauntlet, and we've got that to deal with. But overall, like I look at this change and I'm like, it's fine, but it did also block out a kind of a 4 Spellweaver comp. But who knows? Hopefully that's actually just through the champs, and some of the changes coming next patch will bring them back a bit. Cool. Okay, Udyr. I'll admit I'm overcritical on this change. I just think that if Udyr needs changes, changing his spell is like the least impactful way to make any change to that champion, because it happens once every 7 seconds, and like a 10% hit on an Udyr spell that happens once. It's just such a small lever to pull. Granted, the good news is it doesn't really do any harm. It just, to me, it's just not the lever we should be pulling.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree on this one specifically. I mean, this is one that I can't really push for, and I was like, I'm not even sure if Udyr's really that good. I mean, like, skirmishers as a whole were dominating, and I think in that situation, you can kind of interpret any of their champions to have been good. And I think we just like over-index on like, oh yeah, that guy's good, and that guy's good in this comp too. Like when there was clear problem children within that. So.
The Vlad change. It's funny. I was pretty negative when I was reading this when it first launched, but I've kind of come around. Because again, I think Vlad needed the buff. No argument there. And in fact, we're buffing him again next patch, so like clearly he needed it. I wasn't sure damage was the lever to pull, so much as like repeated casts or maybe more healing. But honestly, like I've kind of come around to it that like at least he can finally kill things, and he's supposed to get his healing from Renewer, so I don't know. I ended up pretty more positive actually by the end of the patch.
I mean, that was the theory. I feel like all the other levers, which we are pulling in the future, like just lead to a lot of like regeneration, which can be frustrating to play against. And I was just a little bit nervous to pull that further, but that is Vladimir's fantasy at the end of the day, and how much we give him of that is kind of the question. And so I was trying to play it safe here, just give him something to help end fights, and that was it.
Makes sense. Okay, Leblanc. I think what we see here is an attempt to try to bring Leblanc into reasonability. But again, I think it was just too light of a touch. And you're going to see this next patch, but we really just need to pick an identity for Leblanc. She can't be a ridiculous chain CC who also one-shots your entire backline. This didn't get us far enough away from that, so to me this is just like, it was too light.
Yeah, I think we've just been struggling with the idea of like, should we allow chain CC to be a thing? And I think like largely no, we don't want it to be a thing, but at the same time, this is what this character does right now, and we've been struggling with that. And now in the next patch, it's going to be a little more clear where we want to push the character. So
Sejuani 1 and 2 buffs. So this is another one where I think players are going to be like, they buffed Sejuani? Cavaliers are already insane. What are they doing? But I actually think this is correct. I think buffing Sejuani 1 and 2 actually lets them kind of like do okay. It means she's actually usable in Nightbringer. I just think this change was good, and Sejuani's not the problem anyway. It's Hecarim, so I think this is just a good change.
Yeah, she was low in the data, and also like when you play her in Nightbringer, like it's not impressive. So I think this was pretty obvious to me. We did shy away from buffing the 3-star value too, because we knew the Spellweaver Cavalier comp was was in the background. It actually wasn't that popular when we had to lock in this change, but yeah, we were pretty wary of that. And I think that was the right call. So
Yep. Soraka Change. I think this is good. You know, there's that. I hate to call it this because it's such a terrible name, but the sussy Soraka build that's going around, and I think it's good that there's like new Soraka builds and it's fun and they're not overbearing, they're not overpowered. It's just a cool way to play a 2-cost that seems good. It seems like a good change.
yeah, the two champs for me this set that are really awkward has just been like Syndra and Soraka. They've actually been underperforming like for most of the set, but player perception on them has been like they're OP and like yeah, I mean just by the data and just playing the game, like a lot of times you'll play Soraka and put items on her and it's like it's fun, but how often do you actually win? I don't know. Now it's a lot more reasonable, I think. So.
Yep. Okay, Trundle. This is probably the change I'm the most negative on, and I'm sure you know why. I think we broke a system rule by adding an AP ratio that I really was not happy to see. I think the urgency behind the change was correct. Trundle was warping metagames by himself and basically making frontline tanks invalid. I think the approach was way off here. I think Trundle just went from OP and meta shifting to not existing. I think his identity's gross. I know right now we can talk about this. 11-13, we're working on a rework to Trundle a bit to try to make him a little bit healthier. So again, I agree with the urgency and the direction, but for me, the big striking thing was like this AP ratio to me is just like, ugh, it's gross.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of it was we knew Trundle was one of the big problem children of the Skirmisher comp at the time, and we were testing versions of it where we just lowered his numbers, and he just honestly felt really bad, and it felt like when he wasn't being played in Dragon Slayers, he was like super bad.
Yep.
And then so we were trying to target it just at the AP part because that seemed to be what was abusing it. So yeah, it didn't necessarily play out the way we wanted it to, but yeah, I had to make a call in the very quick time there.
Yep.
So
Varus 3 nerf. Varus 3 nerf, I mean, good because Varus ended up being OP and needed another nerf after. So no argument here. Like clearly it wasn't enough, but like at least it was directionally correct.
Yeah, I think this is just a think we did something, but yeah, he was still OP. So
yep. Okay, Lulu 3. This isn't going to be a popular response, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think this was a good change. Believe it or not, I think this was a good change. I think Lulu 3 being more rewarding was fine. I think the attack speed part of Lulu's spell is perfectly fine and healthy and good for the game. I don't think it addressed the CC part of it, which clearly we did in the B patch later. But like, I know there's going to be players that look at this and be like, they buffed Lulu and then had to nerf her. And it's like, well, that's not how it works, right? Like, this part of her spell kind of needed the buff. And so I still think this is a good change.
Yeah, we're just trying to make more champions to chase, especially at the 3 costs. You know, at the time, they were kind of being ignored, and she was an obvious one who was, like, way below all the other ones. So tried to find a safe way to buff her 3-star. But yeah.
Yep. Morgana, I think, again, directionally, this is a good change. I think we're going to struggle with Morgana for the rest of the set, to be honest, because it's like she went from this insanely ridiculous OP memorable thing that everyone built, and she's never going to be that good again. And so that's always going to be looming on us for a while. It's because, like, these changes are good. These changes were necessary. Is anyone building Morgana now? No. Will they ever? I don't know. She's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, she's more at her actual cost tier now. I was just noticing her, like, actually being played, especially by, like non-super high-level players. They would just, like, put her in the front, and then she would just die before her, her stun would go off, and I just felt like that was just off. And she was just really weak in the data overall, so
yep.
I had to give her some survivability and just, like, getting that spell off faster.
Yep. Pantheon. Ugh, this is another one. It's another skirmisher. It's another thing. And again, I think you had to hit it. Pantheons with 90% damage reduction, or even just 80% which, by the way, was scaling with Dragon Slayer. Not okay. I think we still have some work to do here. Again, the urgency is good. And I think with how much you had on your plate, it's like I get it, because there were so many changes going in. Ideally, we can get Pantheon to a slightly healthier state. But of all the change, like, even though I'm pretty negative on this one, I think it ended up in an okay place. Like, Pantheon's still a good tank at 65%. He's still a good Dragon Slayer. You're still happy to get him at 2-star early. So still some work to do, but of all the Skirmisher changes, this is one I'm like, it's all right.
Yeah, I think this still like pushed us in the right direction because I think putting that much power on the DR was just way too much. So trying to redisperse it somewhere else, if you need it, makes more sense.
Yep. Nidalee, this is another one I'm just like, this champ is like, you could double this number and I barely doubt she'd be that exciting or useful to play. Like she needs help. She's an 11-13 project. So it's like, I can't fault you for the change because it's like she needs it. Would have liked to see something a little more fundamental to helping her be successful. No one's playing Nidalee. The one build I've seen, Tanner showed me this, one of our China players, is you can play her with Shadow Jeweled Gauntlet IE because she only casts once, so she only suffers the drawback of Shadow Jeweled Gauntlet once. And then she gets really big crits with the damage that can now crit because it's spell damage crit. And she can do a good chunk. And he showed me that with 3-star and he got 3rd. So,
Yeah, it's tough. I think she's also like doesn't turn on till too late often the times. And then when she does, she sometimes just gets like CC'd and stuff. It's just, she has a really tough loop right now, I think. And just a lot of things going against her. So.
Yep. Oh, the Riven change. Okay, this one's unfortunate because we're reverting this next patch. Like, we're literally just hard reverting this change. Which means the change shouldn't have been done, but I don't fault you for this change, right? Like, Riven was garbage. No one was playing that champion. I think a lot of the other changes that have been made, like the 4-cost reductions, hit Riven's strength here. And I think there's another, we've talked about this before in the past, of like, maybe we changed too many things all at once. I think this is a good example of that patch. So maybe I wouldn't have done it for that reason, but I can see why you thought this needed to be done, and so I don't fault that.
Yeah, I was trying to align Riven and Yasuo because actually they're like super close in terms of power level statistically, and like I was just trying to align them better because Yasuo seemed to be performing at least decently, and this seemed like the right change at the time, but it ended up just being kind of over the top. It's weird though because like even in the current patch, like she's strong, but it doesn't feel like Berserk strong. It's definitely really strong. So.
Yep. All right, Aphelios. We did a small AD buff. I think it was good. Originally, there was an extra damage buff that was on top of it, and I know people like Kyun were like, oh my god, it's going to be the Aphelios patch. Well, it certainly didn't become the Aphelios patch. Aphelios can work. I've seen him work, but he feels like a B-tier comp right now. So, TLDR, the change was good, and it was probably better to play safe than sorry here. So, seems fine.
Yeah, he was underperforming after the change to his Velka crit, and then we basically kind of pulled back some of the buffs because we wanted the 4-cost tier in general to just come down. So that kind of is what happened.
Yep. Draven Nerf except buff at 3-star. This just seems solid to me. People are still playing Draven. I'm still seeing a lot of Draven. Like, he's not quite like the instant win he was in like 11-9, but he's good. So this seems like a solid change.
And his 3-star is really good now, so.
Yep. Ivern bug fixes, I think those are good. I still think Daisy, like, I think Ivern is, like, one of the lamest champions in a way. Like, I don't know what it is, but, like, if you remember Annie from set 2, they're basically the same concept. But Annie had, like, Summoner, so she could get, like, bigger Tibbers and stuff like that. There was Mage Cap Annie that had, like, you could summon 2 of them. Yeah. Ivern, no one's found a fun fantasy with Ivern yet.
Yeah, I've tried some silly stuff like Coven, like Gidsy's Rage Blade, just trying to like actually make Daisy hurt people, but it's just so impractical.
Yeah,
the thing is, Ivern and Daisy are strong for sure. Like they're actually some.
Yeah. It's probably the best champion to run itemless. Like it's just a damn good champion to run itemless.
Yeah.
But I do think in the future we're gonna have to find a way that like you'd actually ever consider putting an item on Ivern. That to me is the big failure here. Okay, Karma buffs. Again, same comment of like we pulled a lever and it's fine. It probably didn't move the needle enough, but it was directionally correct and didn't overshoot, so I'll take it.
Yeah, same story as with Aphelios. We had a bigger one in, but we pulled back because we wanted the forecast to come down. So
yeah. Jax, this one was just a miss. Another, like, of all the skirmisher ones, like, we just shouldn't have done this. So it's getting reverted next patch. Yep.
Yeah, we're literally reverting it. So yeah, I think this is just a big mistake on the read here, because if anything, the skirmisher that needs to be powerful is Jack. So this was just a bad read.
Although I will say the funny thing is, we say we're reverting it. We're only reverting it at 1 and 2 star. The 3-star direction was correct, and in fact, we're buffing it even further next patch.
And he'll still be worse than a lot of the other 4-cost 3 stars, to be honest. But...
Yep. Mordekaiser Nerf. Again, same thing where it's like directionally fine, but doesn't solve some of the fundamental things we need to solve with Mordekaiser. I know Kent had one in for 11-12 that I asked to be pulled, because I think certainly the difference of an itemized Mordekaiser versus an unitemized Mordekaiser right now is a little vast, and the itemized Mordekaiser with 4 Dragon Slayer probably a little over the top, but it is a 4-cost, and like maybe it's not that bad, but
yeah. I mean, we snuck this in really late after running simulations and just seeing that he was at the 4-cost here. He was just still too dominant relative to everything else in the game, and so we had to just do something real fast.
The funny thing is, though, on live, it's not like a ton of people are playing Mordekaisers. Like, he still exists and he still does his thing, but he's certainly not dominating. So like, but again, like, if anything, maybe the hits to Trundle and Pantheon were enough to be like, not everyone's running 4 Dragon Slayer every game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, Velka's Nerf. You know, it's funny. This is another one I think I'm going to be in the minority on, because Velka's is certainly less popular now. And I know you and Kent were even considering buffing Velka's. I think Velka's is right where he should be. Crazy enough.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like he can have big impact, but he's definitely a high risk, high reward type of champion. Mm-hmm. You know, like, you get stunned, you get trapclawed, and it's just like GG.
Yep.
And the items are pretty, like, fairly specific.
Yeah,
you know.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this was just a little bit either unnecessary or overboard, in my opinion. So one of those, I think, is where I like.
Yeah, I do think Force Spellweaver and this in the same patch was probably incorrect, though. Cool. And then tier 5, Darius. Oh God, this just reads like a mess, and I don't blame live for this as much. It's just like, Darius is a weird champ. He's a weird champ. He's hard to understand. And if anything, I blame myself. And I was talking to Witty about this last night in one of our long talks, is like, having tanks as 5-costs, I think, was the mistake. When I made that call that Darius is supposed to be support for Aphelios and Garen is supposed to be support for Karma, I think that actually screwed us direction-wise. Because we've always been trying to make sure that Darius isn't like dominating the damage charts, and it just makes him less fun. So I think these changes were trying to help solve some of those issues, but Darius is still Darius, and fundamentally I think that's the thing to solve.
Yeah, I mean, the way that these changes came about was we were doing the shred changes, and then we realized, okay, well, you know, Garen's doing all right, but Darius isn't doing so hot. So we had to just throw in changes to make him more legit, like, itemized carry potential. And
yep.
I mean, he's a lot better now, in my opinion, but it's not exciting, I guess, for a 5-cost.
Yep. Garen, same thing. We were doing the shred nerf. The shred nerf, I think, was correct. I'm glad we did the shred nerf. I think we gave him, like, Garen's still a good champion. It's just right now it's very hard to get to him. But even in, like, when Hellion was at its peak with the Teemos that came out of nowhere, like, you still want a Garen as your frontline for that Teemo comp. Like, Garen's still really good. So, cool. Heimerdinger buffs. I think these are solid. I think, again, right now everyone's struggling to get to the point where Heimerdinger can be a carry, but, like, he's still a good carry.
Yeah, it finally feels like the big boom we were talking about, like, way back on PvE. And like, this is actually Kent actually pushed me to do this. He was like, it's not good enough yet, and I think it was the right call. So,
sweet. The Kale change, man. Again, we already talked about Kale. I think this was a very controversial change. She has 500 health, and you still see 1-star Kales take no damage and destroy your entire team. I think, again, it felt like a Band-Aid, and it didn't really move the needle much. I think sometimes there were players who were like, she could have 100 health and be just as good, and it's like, it's kind of true. It's kind of true.
100 would be real bad. But
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. And, we're slapping another Band-Aid on her in 11-12. But, like I said, the reality is I think we just have to smooth the curve on this champion a lot. So.
Yeah.
Vola Bear, I think this is solid. This goes back to what I said earlier about how tanks aren't really good 5 costs. Even Witty and I were discussing this, and it's like, Vola Bear's a 4 cost. He's a really good 4 cost. He doesn't feel like a 5 cost.
Yeah. I think because it just his traits actually almost stand out more than sometimes than his spell.
Yep. So, future learnings. Okay, items. Archangels. Oh, you and I disagree on this one a bit. But, I should be fair. We agree that this buff needed to happen. The thing we're talking about now is there's another buff coming next patch. We're buffing them the exact same amount next patch. I'm like, eventually this is just going to be like Warwick and Vlad are happy and no one else builds it anyway. So, what's your stance here?
Yeah, I mean, my stance is right now, those builds aren't even impressive enough to actually be something that people want to chase after. Which, I don't know. I feel like if an item is either not built often and also is not even built on that much in the very specific cases where it's supposed to be good, it's just bad.
Yeah.
So I feel like these items are just bad right now. And the question is, when we put them to the right spot, are they now just abusive? Maybe, but I think we weren't even there yet.
That's fair. There was a PvE game where I faced a Taric that had 3 of these, 2 of the HP one and 1 of the AP one, and it was just the freest overtime because couldn't kill him. He just eventually had a bajillion health and kept healing himself, and it was like, see you in draw phase, and he lost because the best he could do was have 1 unit surviving, but it was funny.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny, I guess.
Yep. Risk Thirster buff, directionally fine, probably too light. No one builds Risk Thirster. The Bloodthirster shield is just way more valuable at this point in almost every case.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, Resistor it's just like a thing you go if you didn't get Bloodthirster, I think, for the most part.
Though I have to call out, everyone gets to be right and wrong, and we admit when we're right and wrong. The Challenger players who said Risk Thirster was the strongest item we've ever printed when it first came out, and then we did nothing to the item, and now it's one of the worst items we've ever printed. Come on, admit you were wrong. Deathblade buffs. I think these were solid. I think Deathblade needed buffs, and I'm glad to see them.
Yeah, I mean, it's now at least it's something you consider on Aphelios and whatnot, so.
Yep. Hextech Gunblade of Immortality, the Shadow version. I was excited for this change. I think this change has been good for the item, bad for the meta. I think the Cavalier comp, the Brambulance comp that used it, is really annoying to play against, as much as I liked kind of being the inventor of that comp. It's just really annoying, and I think this is one of those items that I look at and I'm just like, we have to find a way to get it off of just brand, otherwise it's just bad for the game.
Yeah, this was our attempt to try to make it a bit more useful, because before this point you would just often have a big caster and they would just heal some dude to your left for 2 and it didn't make any sense. So This makes it more often useful, but yeah, I mean, I think the dot champion's just going to be a lot better with this item in general, so we'll have to see how we go forward.
Yeah, Socks correctly pointed out that if you want to put this on a character, you want it to be a character that's doing a lot of AP damage, but most of the characters, in order to do a lot of AP damage, need things like Jeweled Gauntlet and Death Cap. And so it's all of a sudden you're out of item slots, and so it's going to be a complex item, I think, for the rest of the set. Final Whisper. I mean, I'm glad this buff happened, because at least now Final Whisper is comparable to Last Whisper. I think the cases where you want Final Whisper are too few and far between. So I think that's the big challenge here.
Yeah, I think that's still a positive overall change. I'm testing out some changes with this thing to make it a little bit more accessible. I think that right now it is a little bit narrow in how you use it, because it has that crit, and all those things. It's just weird.
Yep. The Redemption change was good. I think Redemption's still a decent item. This was a good change. Maybe I would have hit the AoE reduction as opposed to the heal, because the heal is much more satisfying than the invisible power. But tomato.
Yep, I've still been confused on which thing to lever to pull on this one when it comes to nerfing and buffing it. So.
Yep. Shiv, that was the shred reduction. I'm glad we did it. And could you imagine the Hellion meta for the first half of this patch if this was still 70? Fucking end me. That would have been terrible.
Yikes.
Okay, Vengeful Trapclaw. Props to Kent. I was wrong on this one. When we were developing this item, I thought this item was going to be bad, never useful. I'm just like, why would you ever build this? Generally, the opposite has been true. Players seem very excited to build this item, and props to Kent. He did it. Like, players are happy with this. That 4th item slot tactic was good. I've seen it be built as a counter item to Assassins. I've seen people very happy to get this. So, hooray, we did it. Good job, Kent.
Yeah, same. I had the exact same feeling. I was like, this is a little weird, but then I playtested it once, and I was like, actually, this is really cool. So I think, and this came in pretty hot. So
yep.
Kent did it pretty quickly. So
sweet. Bug fixes. I'm glad we fixed bugs. Not going to go over them all, but we should keep fixing bugs. Shocker. And then that led to the B patch. I came back from vacation. Granted, me coming back from vacation was not the signal of the B patch. Like, there was already people thinking about B patches. That's not how it works. I think this B patch was really good. I think it hit a lot of the things. The common response when we started this B patch was, it's just going to be an Assassin and Abomination meta. And there is a little truth to that. Assassins and A-bombs are still very good. They weren't touched. Assassins, though, because they're one of the most like counterplayable traits in the game, I was never worried about them being like too dominating. And so far that has been the case. Like, Assassins are good. They're definitely A tier, maybe even a low S tier, but they're not like insane. And then A-bomb is still the exact same thing it was, which is like, if you high roll it early and get 5 A-bomb, like, it's great with the perfect items. So different problem to solve that required more time, but overall this seemed to improve the meta.
Yeah, I think we just hit some of the like biggest outliers in terms, especially like these 2 cost reroll comps that are really powerful. So yeah, I'm happy with the diversity. Seems to be pretty good overall. And there's always going to be some stronger comps, but it seems like there's a lot of stuff that's playable. So
so I'll say Cavalier. I think these changes were correct. I think we still have to address Hecarim. Hecarim's the real monkey on the wall here, but I think these changes were correct.
Kennen, he's a horse, not a monkey.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Kennen, I think if we were too harsh on anything, maybe this, but Kennen was really good. There were some challenger players who were saying they'd rather have Kennen 2 in their comp than Vola Bear 2, and I believe them. Like, I think there was truth to that because of how frequently he cast at 100 mana. So this is definitely it feels like another Morgana case where it was like he was so good, and now he's just what he should be, but kind of sucks. So
yeah. That sucks if that's actually the case, but hopefully we'll figure that out soon.
Yep. The Set nerf seems good. I'm still seeing people play Set and still do okay with him. So, but he's weaker and he's not quite S tier anymore. So good. Varus, same thing. I'm still seeing people play Varus. I'm still seeing him do okay. Seems good. And Lulu, same thing. I think the Lulu changes were right what we wanted them to be. So these to me seem slam dunky.
Cool. Yeah, man, I think we agree that this was a nice B patch, especially considering, again, how fast we have to do things in general. It was pretty good.
Cool. All right. Hopefully we're starting to get to that point in the set where the set starts getting better and a little bit more balanced, and we're starting to level off here as we hit the back half. Patch 11-12 is our halfway point. So hopefully we can start seeing some more leveling off. It feels like in the back half of the set, watching people play on live, we're getting closer. Still some work to do. But yeah. So that's gonna do it for this video. Any closing thoughts?
Oh, it's been a tricky set, so hopefully we're making progress. That's all that matters.
Cool. All right, that's gonna do it for this patch postmortem. Until next time, take it easy.